Okay, I think it's about time, so maybe we can get started. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to joining us during this exam season. I know everyone must be super busy right now, so thank you for joining us. So my name is Dodo Xu. I'm assistant professor of sociology at Hong Kong U. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Tarani Chandola, who is a medical sociologist, which means he's mainly interested in social determinants of health. I think now his research primarily focuses on work-related stress, if that's correct. So Professor Chandola joined Hong Kong U in 2021, and since then he has made great contribution to the research methods training within our faculty. Professor Chandola obtained his PhD degree from Nuffield College, University of Oxford in 1998, and worked in University of Manchester for many years. Professor Chandola is my boss in many ways. So he's the head of the department and also the director of SSRC. And he's also my senior faculty mentor. So if I can say anything about Professor Chandola is that I think he's an excellent scholar, a great mentor, a likable colleague, and most importantly, a real gentleman. So ladies and gentlemen, I give you Professor Tarani Chandola. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dodo. And I make it compulsory for having all my colleagues know my CV and speak my praises every time they they introduce me. I am also really deeply honored that all of you are here today because the topic is not very exciting. Perhaps it's about research methods training. So I'm really happy that you're here. It's going to be a fairly short presentation, partly because a lot of this presentation is coming out from a teaching development grant that I got from the university on developing research methods training in the social sciences. So this is partly a report about the outputs that we generated for that, but also it is partly about some of the new AI and deep learning methods that are being used in methods training. So I'll illustrate some of that a little bit to a very surface degree, and then hopefully we can have some questions and conversations about where should we be going next, because I really would value your feedback, because depending on what you suggest, I can start implementing future training, future workshops on research methods training that will be led by your demands. So here's a little bit of the outline for today. So I'll first be talking about the Introduction to Research Methods online training course that I developed for the university, followed by, and that was largely for undergraduate students, but it's open to all students at HKU. So anybody with an HKU email can log in and access that course. And then I'll be talking about the Introduction to Quantitative Data Analysis in the Social Sciences. That's aimed at a slightly more postgraduate level. And again, that's completely open resource for anybody to use. After talking about that, I'll talk about some of the AI tools in research methods. I'll be looking particularly at some AI tools for reviewing research literature, as well as standard ChatGPT type tools for quantitative and qualitative data analysis, and finishing it with some of my issues and concerns about using large language models in research. So first of all, the online course for Introduction to Research Methods, myself and my team, we developed that last year and we launched it in time for 2023, the undergraduate intake in August. And so we sort of promoted this course to the new undergraduate students coming to HKU, and we're continuing to promote it this year as well. So it's open to everybody in HKU. So all you have to do is click on that link, and you'll get to, at some point, you'll get to see something like this. Um, and and you know, for you or any student, you can just click on take this course, and you know, well, I should probably log in and show you what the course looks like. Okay. So basically, there are four modules there. The first module is sort of an introductory module, really getting students to learn about the different philosophical approaches to research methods in the social sciences, but also in other kinds of disciplines. And so each of these modules has a little quiz and mini project attached to that. So students complete each module as they go along. The second module is a bit more hands-on, more practical about developing and planning research. And the third module goes into some of the most common data analysis and collection methods, both quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. And the fourth module is about writing up and disseminating research. So at the end of all of this, students do a final project where they're meant to upload a poster about their specific research project. So each of these modules ends with a specific task where they're supposed to sort of develop a research question at the end of module one. At the end of module two, talk about their methodology or epistemologies behind that research project. At the end of module three, they're supposed to talk about what are the specific research methods they will use to analyze their research project. So each of these mini projects sort of ends up with a final poster that the students develop. You know, it's completely online. There's a chatbot that students can use if they get stuck on particular questions. Um, so let me go back to my slides. Yeah, so this module was developed as part of two modules that were launched last year. The other module was for students to get prepared for learning at university. So nothing to do with research methods, but you know, how to organize their time, how to navigate timetables and all of that. And participation in each of these two self-paced courses was really promoted heavily last time, and students got some credit in finishing the course. So they would get one out of classroom academic credit as a result of participating in this course. You can see not very many students actually finished the course, you know, in terms of submitting a poster. So over 4,000 students have now started the course, but only 122 have obtained a certificate. Maybe you know, that's one of the things that I'll need to look into, you know, how to encourage students more to actually submit a poster and complete the modules. But it's still encouraging that quite a few students have started the course. And here's some examples of the posters that students have presented. I was really impressed with the first one. It's a really fancy looking poster. Although, of course, there's no way of checking whether this is just a poster that's been recycled from some other existing posters. Hopefully, it's not. I did a quick you know, Google search for this title. I couldn't see anything remotely like that. But the second one is more typical from coming out from the poster presentations where each of the modules are specifically designed to get students to answer what is their research question, what is their methodology, what is their research design. So that gives you a little bit of flavor about this online introductory course. As I said, it's largely aimed at undergraduate students, although postgraduate students might find it to be quite useful as well, partly because it's like a little refresher course. Now, each of these modules takes about we timed it. It takes about 30 minutes to 60 minutes to complete. So it's a little bit long. I was told by my pedagogical teaching development expert that 30 to 60 minutes is a bit too long. I should be heading for more bite size between 20 to 30 minutes. But on the other hand, the teaching development grant sort of insisted that we have long courses. So there were conflicting demands about what we had to put in terms of the number of hours. So that's why they're a little bit longer than perhaps would be pedagogically useful. But there's a lot of content there, and so hopefully it is useful for any students interested in introduction to research methods. And so it's applicable across both undergraduate and postgraduate courses. So that's the first output that I wanted to talk to you about. And as I said, it's also open to students from outside HKU, as you might have seen from there's another link for if you want to complete this course and do so from outside HKU as well. So the second set of outputs that were generated from this teaching development grant was this one specifically focusing on quantitative data analysis in the social sciences. And here we sort of developed a series of workshops that were face-to-face. So we organized in between 2022 to 2023, a number of these workshops face-to-face, where we had students working on practical data examples on, say, survey data analysis and longitudinal data analysis in SPSS, doing some Excel data analysis, and then some linear logistic and multi-level regression models in R. So when you click on this link, it takes you to the homepage that has all of these resources linked, and that's on the Social Science Research Center, SSRC Research Center, and basically, again, it's perhaps not as intuitive or well laid out as that online introductory course, but it really is useful for students that want to, say, learn some basic SPSS. There's some introductory videos on what each of the workshops contains, and then there's some outline and step-by-step instructions for students to go through these course materials if they want to learn about analyzing bivariate distributions SPSS or longitudinal data in SPSS. So there are videos of the actual courses that we held in the workshops, but what's perhaps more interesting are the step-by-step introductions to each of these workshops. So, for example, if you click on that, it'll take you to a Word document that outlines each of the steps, that tells the students what survey data, how do you get started with survey data, what is SPSS, and a point-and-click version for students to learn how to use SPSS, for example. So that's that the first section is about using SPSS for learning about how to do some very basic analysis in SPSS, followed by slightly more less basic on longitudinal data analysis in SPSS. We also ran a workshop on some Excel data analysis because, of course, nowadays students need good spreadsheet skills as well. And the last bits was on getting students to learn about R, some basic regression models in R. So we focus on linear logistic and multi-level regression models, and we had a series of materials that we developed, some introductory videos, how to download and install R, how to run linear regression models in R, logistic regression models in R, and a whole series of step-by-step instructions for students to learn each of these models with a not point and click, but with detailed instructions on how to run models and how to interpret those models. And once again, there are also the videos of those workshops available. So these materials are perhaps aimed at maybe a slightly more postgraduate level student, but of course, undergraduate students can use them as well. And these are completely open access. You don't even need to log in. You just need to go to the website, and students can download and use these materials. So the kinds of people that might be expected to use these kinds of materials are you might be wanting to, say, supplement your research methods course training. So if you are teaching research methods with saying, okay, here's some resources that students can learn SPSS or Excel or basic R commands. So that's the level at which I was pitching these particular course materials at. So one of the main objectives for today's seminar is to publicize these materials. So these materials are now available. They've been available for the last few months. So if you or any of your students are interested in them, please do feel free to use. You don't have to tell me. You just use them as you see fit. But I'm guessing, quite a few of you are probably advanced users. You probably don't need to have any sort of basic regression modeling techniques. But in case you are teaching, this might come in useful. These resources might come in useful. So, so that was the first half of today's presentation, where I was going to tell you about the outputs from this teaching development grant that hopefully will be useful to some of you who are teaching research methods. Okay, so let me go on to the next part, where I talk about some of the new AI tools that are being used increasingly so in research methods. And here, this part of the talk is much more exploratory, mainly because I myself am just getting quite starting to use these kinds of large language models in research methods. So, a lot of you will be familiar with ChatGPT, but there are a whole bunch of other LLMs, large language models, that are increasingly being used for research. And the very nice thing about these LLMs is that they're pre-trained. So you don't need to know anything about machine learning. You don't need to know anything about coding. You don't need to know anything about programming, and you can use our everyday language, English language or other languages, to talk to the models, to get it to analyze, to interpret the data, and visualize the data. Of course, this involves some, it's very rare that you can use the LLMs just out of the box. You, of course, need to prompt it for it to understand what is it you really want. And so there's a little bit of a learning experience in getting to know what are the most useful prompts, and also getting to know some of the issues and concerns that happens when we are using these kinds of LLMs. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about in the second half of this presentation. So, so one of the newer AI tools that I've been using quite a bit is Site.ai. So this is particularly useful for research reviews. There are so many of these AI tools now that summarize research. I can't keep up because every day there seems to be a new one. I like this one because you can access it from HKU. You don't have to pay. Yeah, a lot of the other ones you have to pay, or the free subscription is not so great. But you can access it directly from HKU library. You can log in through your library account, And it is not bad. So I've used it quite a bit, and so I'm going to illustrate some of the good and maybe not so good elements to it. What's really good about it is that it has an AI assistant, which will try to summarize the the research for you. And but of course we have to be quite careful in the ways how those research summaries are comprised of. So we can just click on the link and it'll take you to the HKU library page to sign on. Okay, so this is the site.ai tool, and you can see you shouldn't access it through the normal SCITE website. You should, because then it will ask you to log on and you'll have to pay or so on. We should always access it through the library homepage, the HKU library homepage, and then we can log in, and it's free for HKU users. So I think, have I logged in already? I think I've logged in already, because usually it'll go through the HQU library page and ask you to log in using your username and password. You can, it's a standard, search tool over here. You can search by title, author, keywords, like you would in Google Scholar or any research database. But what's particularly useful is the assistant over there. So what I'd like to point your attention to is to using the AI research assistant. And here you can get it to summarize different studies. So for example, I am currently doing some research on loneliness and one of the biomarkers of stress, which is cortisol. So loneliness and cortisol. So I've been asking this AI research assistant to summarize the research on loneliness and cortisol, for example. So let's just type that in. So if I just say summarize the research on loneliness and cortisol, will think it will be finding the most important or most searched papers on loneliness and cortisol, combining those results. I think it's, and then it comes at some sort of conclusion. The nice thing about this is that it is linked to all of the key research databases. So the actual references that it cites are real papers, unlike ChatGPT, which sort of makes up a lot of the research papers. So each one of the cited research papers are real papers, and it does some fact checking as well. And it gives us, a summary over here, telling us about the associations. I'm going to just be ignore all of that and go straight to the conclusion, which is saying that the relationship between loneliness and cortisol is multifaceted. Evidence suggesting loneliness can lead to both blunted and heightened cortisol responses, depending on various contexts. Further research is needed. So I'm afraid I've been using this search term quite a bit. So the very first time I asked it to summarize the research, this concluding paragraph was, oh yeah, there's a strong association between loneliness and cortisol, and it's really strong. And then I was putting in more queries that said maybe it's not so strong, and so maybe but it's still sort of saying, yeah, there is a relationship. Yeah, so it's saying, yeah, one of the ways, if you just want to skip over all of the existing research studies, you say, okay, I don't want to read all of that. I just depend on the AI. The conclusion is telling us, yeah, okay, there is a relationship between loneliness and cortisol. Okay, it's a bit depends on the context and so on, but further research is needed. So let's interrogate this a little bit. So in another prompt, I asked it to what was it? Okay, so in another prompt, I asked it, is there strong evidence that loneliness increases cortisol? So let me just copy that and see what happens when I type that prompt in. And then you'll go through the studies and, hopefully it should come up with the sort of relatively similar conclusions that we had previously, which said, yeah, there is a relationship, although it really depends on the context. And this time, if we see after it's fact checking, yeah, because I know the literature, I know these studies. These studies are the most important studies, what I would expect, and it says yes. In summary, while there is evidence supporting the notion that loneliness can lead to increased cortisol or altered cortisol dynamics, the relationship is complex. So it's still coming up with a research summary that's saying there is a relationship, although it's complex. So so the next question I had was, okay, because I know there are many studies that say that there's no relationship. Yeah. So I wanted to test this particular AI tool to see whether or not it was really picking up these studies that show no relationship between loneliness and cortisol. And what, of course, it never comes up with exactly the same results as before. There's lots of empty chairs here. Please come in. Don't feel don't feel shy. So it's come up with an answer over here. It's saying, in summary, while there are studies that support the idea that loneliness is associated with increased cortisol levels, there are a significant number of studies that find no relationship or a blunted response. So the evidence is mixed. So you can see it's quite a bit more nuanced here. Whereas before it was saying, yes, there is a relationship between loneliness and cortisol. When I start prompting it further, saying, well, actually, hang on, what about the no association studies? It's becoming more negative about the association. So it is quite a powerful tool. It does summarize the research, but maybe in order to get, these kinds of prompts are not, how to say, very sophisticated prompts. And clearly we can't just use these research summaries in our publications, but it does help us to know that these tools do exist, and we can use these tools maybe not off the shelf, but we can use these tools in order to engage more deeply with the research literature, so long as we keep prompting it for more details. So not to accept everything that that from our first prompt, but clearly engaging more and more with these kinds of prompts so that we can get at the detail of these studies. And slightly worryingly, when I click on some of these studies where it says, yes, there's an association, and I read the papers and it turns out to be there's no association. So sometimes the AI underpinning it is not really picking up the nuance of the studies. Yeah. So so this is quite a sophisticated tool. I think the other tools are quite at a similar level of sophistication. So as of now, probably these AI tools for summarizing the existing research is probably not quite at the stage yet where we can get rid of independent reviewers of the research. but it's still quite useful in doing a very quick summary of the research process. And perhaps, for undergraduate or master's level thesis, it might be sufficient, but clearly it won't be enough for any sort of serious engagement with the research literature. So that was one particular example I wanted to talk about the use of AI in summarizing research. And the second example is ChatGPT. So and I'm focusing on ChatGPT because we can access ChatGPT through HKU. It's free, but although it's kind of limited in what it can do. So ChatGPT, if you have access to the paid version, of course, with the paid version, because we're in Hong Kong, we have to use a VPN to bypass to get the full version of ChatGPT, which you have to pay for. But through HKU, we get a limited version of ChatGPT that is largely text-based, and we can still get it to do many things. But apart from ChatGPT, there are so many other large language models out there that are really being used for research. So it's not that I'm saying ChatGPT is the best, it's just that we can access it really easily through HKU. So what can we, for quantitative data analysis, I'll just go through a few use examples of using ChatGPT. So the very first one that anybody doing quantitative data analysis knows is coding. So coding is often, I can never remember coding, the specific coding, and so ChatGPT is a useful help tool in helping coding. So, for example, I wanted to, supposing I've forgotten what is the R code for a multi-level regression model. So I can just go to ChatGPT and ask it that, and it will give me the standard. So let me sign in. Okay. So let me go to the question, what is the R code for a multi-level regression model? And oops. So ChatGPT 3.5, which is the more basic level of ChatGPT, will just give me the code, and it'll tell me, how to run a multi-level regression model in R, and it will sort of annotate this by giving me, what is the specific contents of each of these commands. And gives me useful things like make sure you replace your response variable, predictor variables with the appropriate variable names in your data set. Now, this is, slightly better than if you just type this into Google, because very often in Google search, you'll just get a whole bunch of different conflicting suggestions that are perhaps not so very useful. And supposing you want a slightly more complex model, multi-level regression model with random slopes. And it tells us we have to load a particular library package and summarize this model. So it gives us the code over there. So it's quite useful, but where it's perhaps super useful is whenever our code goes wrong. So, and that happens frequently. And what happens in a software package is that we often get a very unhelpful error message in red. It's like error, but it doesn't make sense what the error is. So you just need to copy that error message into ChatGPT and says, what went wrong? and it will try to figure out what went wrong and give you the corrected code for it. So that's really the big value of using ChatGPT or other large language models for coding. But more recently, you can use ChatGPT and other LLMs for actually doing data analysis. And the paid version of ChatGPT has a data analysis section. So you can actually just run. You don't even need to know anything about R or Python. You can run, visualize, and get the results from ChatGPT directly. However, with this interface, the HKU version, it's much more limited. So it can't really run the analysis by itself. So what we have to do is to feed the data in and get it to suggest some example codes for running the analysis. So I just made up some data here. It's a very small data set with some time values, time 1, 2, 3, 4, something called outcome that's got labeled A and B, and something called sex, M and F. And we can just copy and paste that data into ChatGPT. And it thinks about it and it's saying, okay, this will look okay. Actually, it's still thinking we want to fit a multi-level regression model. So let me start a new topic so as to not confuse it. So it's saying like, you have a table, it looks like a data set about different individuals, and these are the variables. And so, if you have any questions about the data in analyzing it, feel free to ask. So, as this is a very small data set, you might immediately see that there's some peculiarities with it. So you can see probably that's a pretty big outlier over there. There's some missing data. There's maybe some other unusual features of the data. You can easily see because it's only 10 rows and just a few variables. But if you've got thousands and thousands of rows and lots of variables, it's not so easy to see. So here's where an AI tool like ChatGPT is really useful. So we can ask it, is there anything unusual about this data set? And GPT 3.5, it'll say, yes, there's some missing values. There's the outcome seems to be a categorical value. The time values appear to be numerical. It hasn't identified the outlier, but let's send it to GPT 4.0. So GPT 4.0 is the more advanced version of ChatGPT, and see whether this slightly more advanced version of ChatGPT will detect the outliers. Yeah, and so here it's saying, yes, there's an outlier for this particular ID 2, and there's a 0 value in time 2. That's also slightly worrying. So it really is good at summarizing the data, but also detecting unusual patterns in the data. So without any coding, so without you having to manually type in various commands, it will assess the patterns in the data set for you. Then, okay, I've got a series of commands that I've asked it to run. Create an average time variable based from time 1 to 4 by ID and add it to the data set using R code. So I'm asking it to generate an R code that will create a new variable. So because this is one of the limitations of GPT as used through the HKU system, it won't actually run it for us, so which is slightly annoying. but in the paid version of ChatGPT, it will actually run it for us. It has an advanced data analysis section. But it will give us the code for running it, so it becomes really easy to just copy and paste it through. So we just need to copy these commands and open up R. Or if you want to run it in Python, it will also run that. So I'm just copying and pasting the commands, and it will create a data set with this new variable that is average time. So now it's calculated the average time over there. So again, rather than me manually typing in the commands, trying to remember what the commands for creating a new variable that is an average, you can see here, that is the command, and it's not very user friendly. Yeah, so you have to, either you have to have a really good memory, or you copy and paste from your previous commands, or you get ChatGPT to calculate what is this new average time variable is. And then when you ask it to do slightly more sophisticated things like visualize the average time for each ID. So we can just run that here. So it'll give us this the R codes again. I won't run all of that, but say I wanted to do something relatively sophisticated, which is to do a regression on outcome. Remember, outcome is a binary is supposed to be a binary variable because it's A and B, but it's coded alphanumerically. So it needs to first sort of create a new binary variable of the outcome, run a logistic regression model with sex and average time as the predictors, and then I'm asking it to visualize the predicted probabilities of outcome by sex and average time. So, it's not it's code that will be easy for some people, but maybe not so easy for many people. So let's just run this. So it spits out the code. So all we have to do is copy the code down and paste it into an R script. And hopefully it will run without any issues. So it needs to load the libraries as well, and then hopefully it will show us the plots over here. Yeah. So this is not very easily seen, but it's sort of run all of the analysis and given us the predicted probability of the outcome by sex over the average time in the data set. So you can see it's quite a lot of code over here, and it's code that some people will be quite familiar with. You kind of need to know your ggplot commands, and it's got lots of niggling things, and it's easy to get it to say, oh, I want to change the color of the lines, or you want to put in confidence intervals. So it's really quite very useful in sort of generating these commands if you've got quantitative data analysis. So I just wanted to highlight that in case you didn't know how sophisticated ChatGPT is now for generating these quantitative data commands. How about for qualitative data analysis? A lot of you will already be using ChatGPT to summarize documents. I use it a lot to summarize documents. But how about doing it slightly more systematically if you want to do, say, thematic data analysis? So here's a particular data set that I found on the internet. It's about Twitter or X interactions between users and companies. So it largely seemed to be about complaints, people complaining to different companies saying, hey, I've got this problem. Can you solve it? Yeah, so I uploaded this. You can upload this data set to ChatGPT. So let me start a new topic. And here we can just add this file. So there's this add command over here. And if I go to where, yeah, so it's a sample data. It's in an Excel spreadsheet, but GPT-4 doesn't accept Excel spreadsheets, but it accepts PDFs. So it's easy enough to convert the Excel spreadsheet to a PDF. If we open that, and you can see that GPT-4 is sort of processing the data, and then it said, yeah. So first of all, we can ask GPT-4, what is this data about? Summarize the contents of the data. So it will summarize it. It'll tell us, it's about various tweets, their responses, interactions with companies, and the kinds of responses people are having from the companies. And then we might want to do slightly more sophisticated things like, what are the 3 most common themes that emerge from the data set, and to identify some indicative quotes. So that's really, that's a really standard prompt to use for qualitative data analysis in ChatGPT. And it'll go through the thousands and thousands of lines and says, okay, the first common theme is technical or service issues. And then it'll say, okay, these are the kinds of quotes associated with that. The second most common quote is customer service, support requests, and these are the kinds of quotes associated with that. And feedback and complaints is the third most common theme. So we can sort of do more sophisticated versions of those themes, identify sub-themes. I wanted to know whether this ChatGPT could do slightly more analysis, like what are the types of responses that are associated with more positive customer sentiment. So it's just going beyond describing the data to getting GPT to analyze whether there is an association between the types of data responses and customer services. So I asked it this question. It basically said yes, if these kinds of responses where there was an acknowledgement and apology by the company that was associated with a more positive interaction, gave us some quotes for that, like that. But I then want to dig into this a little bit more and say, what user quotes indicate that they are happy with these responses, and this is where I ran into the problem. Oh, yeah, okay. So this it says there are no explicit quotes from users indicating their happiness with these responses, but this morning when I ran this, it actually hallucinated and it gave me all these usernames and the quotes associated with these usernames, saying, oh, these are the quotes indicating that, if there was this kind of response from the company, this indicated this user was happy with the response. And then when I looked up on the original file, the username existed, but the quote didn't exist. So it's actually making up data being prompted, by my question. So it's now learned that I've been asking this question enough that it says, actually, no. So it's how do I say? It's quite worrying that if we try to get it to do quite more sophisticated things, you're not quite sure about the reliability of ChatGPT. So let me just sum up with some of the things and concerns that are coming out from the use of these large language models. So hallucinations. So I just talked about that. So sometimes it's quite worrying that these large language models like ChatGPT are coming up with data that doesn't exist, which is worrying. And the other thing is like the site.ai, the research reviews, it's not necessarily 100% accurate. So there can be coding errors as well. We have to be worried about algorithmic bias. I'll talk about each one of these a little bit as we go ahead. So we definitely know ChatGPT often makes up data. But there are other large language models that are supposed to be less biased. And here I'm not quite sure which ones to recommend, partly because I don't want to pay for them. So I don't know who, perhaps, I mean, Meta's Llama 3.2 is supposed to be very good, but, I haven't used it myself. So there are other large language models that are supposed to be less biased, but we have to be quite wary if you're using ChatGPT. For basic stuff, I think it's okay, but more sophisticated analysis, I think it's not so great. We definitely know there's a lot of bias in algorithms, and algorithms are what drive these large language models, partly because human biases are built into algorithms, but also partly because the data that feeds into these large language models are lacking. So here is one typical example where the facial recognition AI can't really detect women of darker skins because there's just less data available to train these large language models on. And of course, you get this classic example of coding errors where it just completely miscodes things because it doesn't have enough training data on it. So it can get very embarrassing, these kinds of coding errors. So I've got the very sort of very racist coding error over here, but there are lots of other examples in the big data analysis world where coding errors of apparently sentiments from tweets or from big data sources have been completely wrong and distorted the inference. But I really want to concentrate on data privacy because I haven't talked about it so much. So you would have noticed that the kinds of examples that I've used in today's examples are just made up data or data that are already there on the internet. But for a lot of us, we're working in the social sciences, we're working with individual personal data, and that comes with data restrictions, of course, for data privacy reasons. We've signed agreements with users that we will only use the data ourselves or within our team or within the university. We're not going to upload the data to Microsoft or Google or the cloud where it could be used by all kinds of people. Yeah. So really, we're limited in what data we can upload to the cloud. Some people think that they can get away around it by sort of saying, "Oh, I took away all the identifiers, yeah, or, maybe the detailed age or date of birth, names, addresses." But we know that's completely useless because these data sets can be easily re-identified once you have some common variables. Yeah. So really, when I was looking through all the examples on YouTube on people using, especially qualitative data to analyze using large language models, I was quite horrified. They were actually sending up whole transcripts of anonymized qualitative data to these LLMs to be analyzed. But then I was thinking, how did you? I'm sure they haven't got permission to do that. And more worryingly, all these people's very personal details are being uploaded to the cloud. So I'm really worried about the ethical implications about that. And of course, there are computational limits. So GPT 3.5, which we can access through HKU, has a limit of about 1,000 to 3,000 words when we submit the data. And GPT-4 sort of increases that word limit a little bit. So one of the key ways of getting way around it is that we can break out our inputs and outputs, and GPT can remember our previous conversations, previous contexts, and we can be more precise with the prompts. But it's still limitation when you're doing sort of these interactive ways of working with ChatGPT. But most serious people, they don't do it this interactive way, like I've shown you in this session. They use the APIs to communicate between the LLMs and a program like Python. So it's really quite easy to sort of open a communication. Write a Python program that says, I want to install ChatGPT or OpenAI in your Python programming, and start a new session like that. And then we can get around this issue about very limited strong limits on the number of words. But of course, every time you use these interactions, it costs money. So there's more tokenization involved. So all of this LLMs does come at a cost, and perhaps an economic cost. I've been told that some people are trying to get around the problem of data identifying personal data by downloading the large language models to local computers or servers. And there, basically we need very, very large computers, very, very, very large servers. So this particular version of AI, the Meta Llama 3, which is not the latest, it's about a few generations ago, it requires at least 64 gigabytes of virtual RAM, which is not inconsiderable. And yeah, I'm not sure how fast things will run on that. So there are people sort of trying to get around these problems of ethical and data issue problems of using large language models for analysis. And we're still sort of working our way through that because the landscape is changing so fast. So I'd just like to end by saying, do use these new teaching resources. These are the old-fashioned teaching resources. So haven't gone into the new teaching resources that are incorporating this AI and large language models into research methods. But I'm hoping we, as part of the Social Science Research Center, we'll be having more workshops and training on these new ways of doing research using LLMs, if you think that is the way forward. So thank you so much for listening to me.